Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here, summa trigerum, summa tangentum, summa spoilerum. I am reading the Saturday, Sunday, March 11th through March 12th edition of the Wall Street Journal. This is the hashtag fake newsy rag that picked a fight with PewDiePie last year. My take on it was, I understand why a lot of people would be offended by PewDiePie's joke, but the problem with that article is it came across as the Wall Street Journal tut-tutting one of these young hoodlums online with their YouTube channels. Something like that doesn't feel like it should be a news story, especially when you look at PewDiePie's video and see in context that, yeah, he was joking, he was making fun of another YouTuber. But anyway, the Wall Street Journal occasionally has some non-fake newsy stuff. And as I was reading this obituary, I was completely charmed by this one I read for the recently passed Spencer Hayes, a Bible salesman turned art collector. I found myself connecting with his art tastes. Obituaries, man, I'm really on Cop Squad today. Man, I don't know what's up. But obituaries often try to just give you sort of a brief, very positive portrait of a person. But the portrait this portrays of Spencer Hayes is just fascinating, and at first I was just enjoying it, but then I got an idea, and I want to be as respectful as possible to Hayes, but I think the story told in this little obituary is brilliant, and it illustrates something I think which is important for artists and writers, which is to have a lust for life and to love life. And Hayes was a person who loved art and appreciated art, and then his life story gives you a feeling for the kind of life he lived and how he was able to become who he was. The kids writing comic books today couldn't live a life like this, in part because we're so successful and we're so wealthy now. We don't have a depression for you to live through. The second bet, short of going back in time and living through the depression to gain life experience, or fighting in World War II to gain that life experience, the second best thing you can do is to love life and to love those who came before you and to appreciate older generations and what they went through. The comic book I'm thinking about was that stupid Squirrel Girl comic. Diversity in Comics recently just roasted it, where the author kept joking, tee hee hee, space Abraham Lincoln. It's so funny. It's like Abraham Lincoln, but he's in space. And that's not funny because it's just a stupid random thing that you're kind of cringily trying to make funny. Real humor comes from observing life and observing real people. And the reason I want to talk about this obituary with you is this is a portrait of a real person, highlighting sort of his eccentricities and his personality. But I want a movie based on this guy. So let's look at this. So it starts with a good hook. Good job. The author is James R. Haggerty, so he gives us a good hook. It was easy to underestimate Spencer Hayes. And then Hayes' friend Steve Hart remembers his first time talking to Hayes on the phone, and Hayes says, "Is this Steve Hart from Oklahoma, the daring, dynamic doer of all great things?" So, it's a warm little witticism, but the picture that we're being given is that Hayes was kind of a jovial guy who'd rib you a bit. "I thought he was a nut," Mr. Hart said. Have you ever seen that in Obituary? I thought he was a nut. This is great. So then Hart tells the story of how he perceived his friend Hayes, and he had this sort of odd sense of humor that made him seem a bit nutty, but that was part of his salesmanship. That was part of his trying to use sort of positive, the gift for gab to make a sale. So this is born poor in Oklahoma. This guy was a Bible salesman. He would go door to door, knock on your door, and try to convince you to buy a Bible. And then later, he and his wife bought more than 600 paintings, drawings, and other works by masters included Henri Matisse, Pierre Bonnard, and Amadeo Modigliani. My boy. Great taste. And then he donated the collection to the Musée d'Orsay. Love the Musée d'Orsay. Somewhere I hope I still have the catalog for the Musée d'Orsay. My edition's a few years old. So, these are not paintings, they are pictures, Mr. Hayes told a friend. They are like my children. Okay? So then it tells us a little bit about, the cause of his death, his love for three-piece suits, and his love for art. His business card described his occupation in one word: salesman. A blunt personality, a direct personality. Tells us about his birth, and at age 6, he got a job shining shoes in a barber shop. I remember taking a lot of pride in how I could make those shoes really shine, he said in a video interview produced by one of his companies, plural. This is like Scrooge McDuck. Scrooge McDuck shines shoes in Scotland, gets his first dime, and then that's the start of his journey to becoming the richest duck in the world. This is the American dream being lived out by this guy. So when he was 7, he said, my father ran off and left. So he's raised by his grandmother, a seamstress, which starts his interest in clothing and wearing nice ties and such. He marries his high school sweetheart at age 19, and they're together for the rest of their lives, Marlene Moss. Then he started selling Bibles, and then eventually started working up his way in the company Southwestern. He motivated himself by repeating affirmations such as, I feel fine, fit, fine, and fantastic, even when he didn't. So he is motivating himself to overcome difficult circumstances. And then it talks about, the company broadening out, his idea to sell more kinds of books and suits. All right. And then I got more interested when it transitioned to talking about his habits as an art collector. In the early 1970s, when Mr. and Mrs. Hayes were decorating a new home in Nashville, she found a painting, Guard Smoking a Pipe, by Bartholomeus Maton, and suggested it would look good on one of their walls. I looked up Bartholomeus Maton, and I found a painting of a young man smoking a pipe. Maton's style, I wouldn't call it, at the level of Leonardo da Vinci or Caravaggio. It's not a very sophisticated type of painting, but it is a very charming, fun genre painting with a lot of personality. So I can see how that would kind of grab your interest. It looks like a fun painting with a fun character. Mr. Hayes said it would be ridiculous to spend $7,500 for a picture. His wife explained that it was a painting. So earlier when he had that quote about his paintings being pictures, not paintings, and them being like his children, now that we've read this, we know that this is Hayes kind of riffing on his wife a little bit, telling the story of how they became art collectors, and it's giving us a little bit of a glimpse of the back and forth between a husband and a wife. The husband saying, I don't want to spend $7,500 on a picture, and the wife says, it's a painting, dear. And then years later, when he tells the story, he insists it's a picture, not a painting. We're getting a little bit of a sense of kind of a feisty but jovial personality from Hayes. And then they began collecting. They specialized in the Nabi group of painters who arose in the 1890s. Edouard Villard became Mr. Hayes' favorite. They decided to donate their collection to the Musée d'Orsay, and this was just last year. So my book wouldn't have any of his collection in it because my book was produced before this donation was made, but they received honors and thanks for this massive donation. It mentioned that he donated it on condition, essentially, that it would be shown in the permanent collection, not stuffed into storage. So again, we're getting an interesting glimpse into this man's personality. He wanted his art to be seen. He didn't want his art locked away and never seen in a dark room. He wanted it to be enjoyed. During his funeral, one of his friends remarked that when he reached heaven, he was sure to begin selling Bibles to the angels. So his friends had this feel for his personality that he was a salesman. This defined who he was. What a character! From shoe shiner to collector of French Impressionists, of Edouard Villard. I remember just seeing a few Edouard Villard's paintings. I'm going to go look at Edouard Villard again because, wow, there's so much life here. There's so much personality here. There's so much good humor here. Abraham Lincoln in space isn't funny because tee-hee, it's so random. Human beings are funny because they express their personalities and they keep on going. This obituary in the Wall Street Journal has more pathos than professional comic books I have read this year. Love life. Look at life. Care about generations who came before you, and don't get fixated on this weird racial, sexual politics that is so temporary. Look for the things that are universal and eternal if you want to tell a beautiful story. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. Hollywood sucks, but if Hollywood didn't suck, I would want the movie adaptation of Spencer Hayes. Love you guys. Catch you later.